Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis tonight. So abortion is back in the news, perhaps a little bit unnecessarily, with former President Trump, who will be the GOP nominee, putting out a statement yesterday on Truth Social that was picked up by all of the major networks and also X. So there were a lot of responses to this because he discussed IVF as well as his position on so-called abortion rights. And I kind of thought that as conservatives, we really didn't have anything called abortion rights. And so there were a lot of mixed reactions to this statement. In fairness to former President Trump, I want to play the entire thing just in case you haven't heard it for yourself. Watch this.
Under my leadership, the Republican Party will always support the creation of strong, thriving, and healthy American families. We want to make it easier for mothers and families to have babies, not harder. That includes supporting the availability of fertility treatments like IVF in every state in America. Like the overwhelming majority of Americans, including the vast majority of Republicans, conservatives, Christians, and pro-life Americans, I strongly support the availability of IVF for couples who are trying to have a precious baby. What could be more beautiful or better than that? Today, I'm pleased that the Alabama legislature has acted very quickly and passed legislation that preserves the availability of IVF in Alabama. They really did a great and fast job. The Republican Party should always be on the side of the miracle of life and the side of mothers, father, their beautiful babies, and that's what we are. IVF is an important part of that, and our great Republican Party will always be with you in your quest for the ultimate joy in life. Many people have asked me what my position is on abortion and abortion rights, especially since I was proudly the person responsible for the ending of something that all legal scholars, both sides, wanted and, in fact, demanded be ended. Roe v. Wade. They wanted it ended. It must be remembered that the Democrats are the radical ones on this position because they support abortion up to and even beyond the 9th month. The concept of having an abortion in the later months and even execution after birth, and that's exactly what it is. The baby is born, the baby is executed after birth, is unacceptable, and almost everyone agrees with that. My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. You must follow your heart or, in many cases, your religion or your faith. Do what's right for your family and do what's right for yourself. Do what's right for your children. Do what's right for our country and vote. So important to vote. At the end of the day, it's all about will of the people. That's where we are right now, and that's what we want, the will of the people. I want to thank the 6 justices, Chief Justice John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Neil Gorsuch, incredible people, for having the courage to allow this long-term, hard-fought battle to finally end. This 50-year battle over Roe v. Wade took it out of the federal hands and brought it into the hearts, minds, and vote of the people in each state. It was really something. Now it's up to the states to do the right thing. Like Ronald Reagan, I am strongly in favor of exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. You must follow your heart on this issue, but remember, you must also win elections to restore our culture and, in fact, to save our country, which is currently and very sadly a nation in decline. Our nation needs help. It needs unity. It needs us all to work closely together. Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, everyone, we have to work together. We have to bring our nation back from the brink, and that's where it is. It's at the brink, and we will. We will do it. I promise you, we will do it. Always go by your heart, but we must win. We have to win. We are a failing nation, but we can be a failing nation no longer. We will make our nation great. We will make our nation greater than ever before. Thank you very much.
So my reaction to this statement was that it was very weak, especially compared to the 2016 version of Donald Trump, when he knew that he needed to win over evangelicals and pro-life advocates to his side in order to win the election. Now, because he just presumes that everyone will vote for him because, hey, he's better than Joe Biden, he's now pandering to the moderates and suggesting that, hey, whatever blue states do, whatever red states do, that's the law of the land. He's not going to stand up firmly and strongly and say that he is the most pro-life president. So the reaction on social media, as you might have guessed, was very mixed. This was from Allie Beth Stuckey, who goes by Conservative Millennial. She said, pro-life evangelicals make a huge voting bloc, yet we've got exactly 0 presidential candidates vying for our vote. RFK picked a far-left social justice activist, and Donald Trump's out here reminding those to the left of us that he's a squish on abortion. Trump's statement was a signal to the left that threw truly pro-life Christians under the bus. The cheering of IVF, support of nonsensical abortion exceptions, and his, quote, will of the people repetition are all ways to convey the message, see, I'm not like those radicals to the right of me. I'm moderate, sane, compassionate, pro-democracy. He's been successfully empathy shamed by the left and still thinks that somehow he's going to convince some of them to vote for him. It is what it is. Trump is currently the most pro-life candidate of the bunch. It's just downright sad. I agree with Allie Beth, because now that he thinks that he has to pander to the moderates, that's exactly what he's doing. But who exactly is he influencing? Did he really win over any of the moderates by suggesting that now somehow he's just going to take a step out and say, whatever the states will, that's what they're going to do. I'm going to be completely out of it. I don't think that any woman who is significantly pro-choice and to the left is now going to say, oh, I'm going to wake up and vote for Donald Trump because of this message. But pro-life evangelicals and even pro-life atheists are not convinced by this. If anything, he's losing votes. So this is putting abortion squarely back into the news cycle and into the debate for 2024, when Donald Trump really didn't have to do this. Why yesterday? Why did he say anything regarding his message on life? He should have stood up firm and let it come up if and when Joe Biden decided to debate. But we'll get more reaction right after this here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com, and use promo code Jenna, that's Jenna, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. So, joining me now for more reaction on abortion being in the headlines and Trump's statement yesterday is Ryan Helfenbein, who is the executive director of the Standing for Freedom Center at Liberty University and also the vice president of communication. So, Ryan, thanks so much for joining. This is such an important topic. And, I remember in 2016 when Donald Trump picked Mike Pence because he was so ardently pro life and wanted to make sure that evangelicals knew where he stood because we are a large voting bloc. But now it seems like he's changing his tune. A lot of the groupies, maybe the MAGA followers on social media, suggested that this was the only way that he could have won over moderates, and he has to basically cast aside pro-life to win. How did you respond to the statement?
Yeah, so I was obviously very disappointed, as many ardent pro-lifers and even abolitionists. I consider myself an abolitionist when it comes to the issue of abortion. I'm for the absolute defense of life. I'll say to what I appreciate that the former president says he values life. I appreciate that by comparison, he's much better than Joe Biden, who wants a nationwide legalization of abortion. 14 states right now, abortion is illegal. You have restrictions in up to 25 states. President Joe Biden wants to do away with that. If he could get carte blanche, that's exactly what he would do. But going to the statement itself, look, there's a lot that is lacking here. Every life, born and unborn, is valuable from the moment of conception. Even on the issue of IVF is valuable at the moment of fertilization. There's a lot of problems with the statement. Abortion is never, I should say almost never, necessary in order to save a mother's life. Statistically speaking, you can say it's never the case in 2024. There are all kinds of ways by medical technology you can intervene and save a mother's life and the life of the child, but that's always invoked. The other part is the aborting a child conceived in rape or incest. Look, you're sentencing the wrong person to death when that happens. So you compound the crime. I'm for harsher sentencing and a more equitable form of justice. That means we need to hold rapists, accountable when this happens, rather than holding a baby responsible for something it did not do. I have a good friend, Ryan Baumberger, who was conceived in rape, and his story is miraculous. It's one of adoption, where he was rescued and saved by a Christian family. All life needs to be protected. As to the context, though, and I think this is really important to understand, and you hit the nail on the head, there are those who are advising Trump that he may not be able to win among key demographics in urban and suburban areas, especially among women. Just like President Joe Biden has a problem in Dearborn, Michigan. He had over 100,000 voters who did not vote in the Democratic primary, Arab Americans who are trying to push for Hamas and BDS and pro-Palestinian sympathies. The same kind of thing on the right, where you have moderate voters, you have urban and suburban women who are saying, hey, you seem extreme on abortion, President Trump. We'd like to see some other kind of messaging from you. I think that's what's happening here.
Yeah, really well said, Ryan. And you're hearing my dogs affirm you in the background. But we heard that rhetoric from Donald Trump previously in 2016 and even throughout his administration that said that every life is precious and every child is a gift from God. He said none of these things in that statement. And that's why I think a lot of particularly evangelicals, but just pro-lifers and, as you said, abolitionists, really surprised and disappointed that he clearly took a step way back from that. And so
Yeah.
how do we decide moving forward who to support and how to support what we want in terms of pro-life policy, when clearly Donald Trump isn't interested in advocating for the conservative pro-life vote?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I think there's a number of key considerations. One is, what Biden's going to do if he's elected. All right, so he's already said what he's going to do. The extremities that they're willing to go to. There are a lot of considerations that voters are going to have ethically when they consider these two candidates and where they line up on the issue of defense of life, on the issue of defense of marriage, on conscientious protections. Consider, for example, the Department of Justice currently, how it is weaponizing the FACE Act to go after pro-life families, pro-life advocates, those who want to just stand on the corner of a sidewalk and they're praying to defend life. They were speaking out in defense of life, and they are actually trying to speak some kind of moral sanity into this equation. They're being arrested. They're being tried. There's all kinds of abusive powers that are coming against them. I would say, if you look at a particular presidency like Trump, a second term, I don't think you're going to have that kind of abuse. More to the point, something to also look back and consider, you had 3 previous presidents, Reagan, you had H.W. Bush, and you had W. Bush. When you look at the Supreme Court and those appointees that they had put on the court, 2 out of 3, Reagan appointees voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. 1 out of 2 for Bush 1, 1 out of 2 for Bush 2. Trump, 3 out of 3 did overturn Roe v. Wade, and it was clear that was a promise. That was a campaign promise given, and one that was delivered. You have to consider all of those things as well, in terms of the context of what we're looking at.
Yeah, and I think that's really wise advice, Ryan. And certainly pro-life advocates should stand up and tell Donald Trump that this isn't acceptable, and we expect him to be
Right.
as ardently pro-life in a second term as he was in his first. But we also do need to remember that he will be more pro-life than the current administration. And so these are very complicated questions. But I mean, for me, it was so disappointing, especially I worked for his campaign. I mean, I know him personally, and I know how much the overturning of Roe versus Wade meant. And yet, he's doing this, I think, for sake of expediency and for to try to appeal to a certain demographic base. I don't really think those people are necessarily interested in hearing this message. And so, to me, it was so disappointing that he's not standing firm on principle. He's going for a more populist mentality. So what can the pro-life community do to send the message, hey, we support you over Biden, but we really want to see you come back to a more firm pro-life stance? And we only got about 30 seconds.
I think political pragmatism robs righteous movements of their strength and power. And so I think at the end of the day, it's important for pro-lifers to speak up on this issue. And just like Elijah, just like John the Baptist, I mean, look, we have a higher calling. And we hold to the supremacy, I do, of Jesus Christ and the gospel in all things.
Amen.
So I have a higher,
well said.
much greater
And
loyalty.
we got to
right?
leave it there. Ryan Helfenbein, thank you so much. And we'll be right back with more with our Legal Eagle panel to discuss the fallout of the Dobbs decision when we get back right after this. As you know, my friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the Giza Dream bed sheets. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike found the world's best cotton. It is ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's Giza sheets come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. The Giza Dream Sheets come in a variety of sizes and colors. Mike's latest incredible deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets. You will also receive a set for as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and use the promo code Jenna. There you will find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, which I have and I love, the MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and now even flannel sheets and so much more. We definitely need flannel sheets for as crazy as all of this weather has been lately. So go to mypillow.com and make sure you use the promo code Jenna or call 1-800-564-8475. That's 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna. So So, after President Trump's statement on abortion and so called abortion rights yesterday, there was a lot of chatter on social media and in the media about whether or not the Dobbs decision actually only or exclusively gave the abortion regulation power back to the states, or perhaps Congress still constitutionally can do something. So, joining me now to discuss all this and more is our Legal Eagle panel for today, which includes Mike Donnelly, who is a law professor and attorney, and Josh Hammer, who is also an attorney and a senior editor at large for Newsweek and host of the Josh Hammer Show. So, gentlemen, welcome. And Josh, I will kick this to you first. And I have to say, both of you were the first actually to bring this argument to me that Dobbs actually allowed more for Congress. And I think you're right. You convinced me. And so I have modified my position, which all conservatives should do when you hear a better argument. And so, Josh, you wrote in July of 2022 this piece in Newsweek that suggested that pro-life advocates need to advance the next cornerstone principle, which is constitutional personhood. So for those who think that abortion regulation can only be at the states after Dobbs, what's your counter argument?
Yeah, Jenna, first of all, I want to give you credit, kudos for your humility and changing your position. I think everyone in the world, regardless of your political ideology, would do better to have a little humility. I certainly have changed any number of my positions over the years as well. So there was absolutely nothing wrong with that. On the contrary, there's much to be applauded when it comes to that. When it comes to constitutional personhood, so look, we're talking here about the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment is probably the most discussed part of the Constitution ever. I mean, it's been litigated so many different parts of it, up and down. The Equal Protection Clause says that no persons can be denied within the jurisdictions, the natural rights of man and so forth there. You cannot deny the equal protection of the laws to any person within a jurisdiction, put another way. So the question arises, well, what if unborn persons, if natural persons actually are persons for purposes of the Equal Protection Clause? If they actually are persons, then that would mean that a homicide statute in a given state that protects born human beings but not unborn human beings would actually be an equal protection clause violation against the unborn. And it turns out, Jenna, that when you look into this, there's a whole host of evidence going as far back as Sir William Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England, the 1775 treatise where he compiled all the English common law. Essentially, it was must-read material for the American founders. That treatise begins with the unborn's rights. That's literally how he begins his entire commentary on the laws of England. Statutes up through the 1860s repeatedly referred to unborn children as naturally understanding that they are children. So that really actually is the proper understanding of the Equal Protection Clause. Now, I'll go one step further briefly here. It's also Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, which gives Congress the ability, indeed the obligation, to enforce Sections 1 through 4 through appropriate legislation. So viewed from that perspective, Congress has an affirmative role here. It's not just the judiciary. Congress should actually go ahead and use legislation to enforce this understanding. They can actually legislate in this arena. It is very much, therefore, a national issue, not just a state issue.
Yeah, really well said. And I completely agree with that. And Mike, why don't you add on a little bit to that before I get to the next question about the Privileges and Immunities Clause, because you see it the same way.
Well, I do agree. Josh said it very well. And, we could spend a lot of time talking about the constitutional issues of substantive due process and due process. But I think Josh gets it right here. This is about applying the laws equally. If unborn persons are persons, which I believe they are. And I understand people have deep convictions about them. I mean, look, Jenna, we're talking about issues of human life here. When does life begin? What is life? I believe that all persons are created in the image of God and have human dignity, and that starts at conception. And so, this is not just a line drawing question. It depends on where you draw the line about where human life begins and whether we're going to protect life from the very beginning. So Josh, I think, makes a compelling argument. This is about enforcing homicide laws. That's exactly the right analogy. And I think he's exactly right.
And so, Mike, I also want to then stay with you too on this Privileges and Immunities Clause issue, because you sent me a Harvard Review piece that was talking about essentially abortion tourism and how states can compel their citizens to not use travel privileges for the purposes of abortion. That's become a really hot button issue, I think, for the states in terms of abortion tourism and saying, well, it doesn't matter what red states do because, women from Texas, for example, can just go to California or Colorado and get an abortion regardless of what week in their pregnancy they are. How can states legislate effectively to stop abortion tourism?
Well, I think this shows why we need a national issue. This is a national issue, and it shows why we need a definition from Congress of life. And, it's not like we don't know what life is. We can't understand what life is. It's a human person. Look, people grow, they're small, and then they get big. They're unborn, and then they're born. And we protect unborn children too. There are homicide statutes, but we, recognize that an unborn child can be a second victim in criminal activities, in assaults, in murders, and things of that nature. And so, but what the privilege and immunities question comes up, Jenny, you're talking about is some states are trying to use the privileges, not the privileges and immunities clause, but trying to, say, look, if you leave our state for an abortion, that's going to be a crime, or we're not going to allow you to do that. And pro-abortion activists are saying, we're going to use the privileges and immunities clause to prohibit states from doing that. Right. So we're about to start getting into a state versus state war over who can travel, where, and when, and for what. We don't want that. We want people to be able to travel freely for any purpose. That's what liberty means. And glad Josh brought up Blackstone, because that's how Blackstone defines liberty, the freedom to move without restraint. And we want that in this country. But I think Congress can solve this problem by coming in and saying, look, we're enforcing the 14th Amendment, equal protection. A human life is a human life from conception. And states, you need to enforce homicide laws.
Really well said. So, Josh, and just about the last minute we have here. So, with President Trump's statement that he basically says, "Hey, I'm gonna punt on this issue. I don't want to deal with this on the federal level." How problematic do you see this being for the next Congress, or should Republicans just kind of grow a pair and say we're going to do that anyway, and then put it forward to Trump's desk if he ends up becoming the next president?
So substantively, at a level of principle, it is obviously the incorrect stance. It's taken the Stephen Douglas popular sovereignty approach, whereas Lincoln came over the top and spoke of natural rights and justice. He's sounding like Stephen Douglas, not Abraham Lincoln. However, living here in the real world, Republicans are not going to have a filibuster-proof majority when it comes to the U.S. Senate after November. So national legislation, realistically speaking, again, in the real world, is likely off the table. So there's no actual tangible harm done in the short term from him taking this stance. But again, operating at a level of principle is incorrect, and we still need to have constitutional personhood as our long-term lodestar.
Yeah, really well said. And I think that pro-life advocates should stand up very firmly and tell President Trump, we may support you, but we really want to make sure that you support consistently conservative principles. So thanks to the Legal Eagle panel. We'll be right back with more on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com, and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. So turning now to a win for conservatives in the area of transgenders participating in women's sports and actually securing women's sports for only biological women. This headline coming from ESPN: the NAIA essentially bans transgender athletes from women's sports. The National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, the governing body for mostly small colleges, announced a policy Monday that all but bans transgender athletes from competing in women's sports. The NAIA NAIA Council of Presidents approved the policy in a 20-0 vote. That's huge. That's incredible. The NAIA, which oversees some 83,000 athletes at schools across the country, is believed to be the first college sports organization to take such a step. According to the transgender participation policy, all athletes may participate in NAIA-sponsored male sports, but only athletes whose biological sex assigned at birth is female and who have not begun hormone therapy will be allowed to participate in women's sports. So joining me now is William Bock, who was the former general counsel for the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency and is very familiar with collegiate sports as well as the Olympics. So, Bill, thanks so much for joining. And what kind of pressure now does this NAIA rule put on the NCAA to follow suit?
Jenna, thank you. It's good to be with you. Huge pressure, Jenna. This is a major development. Significantly, the announcement of the NIIA said that after analysis that they had concluded that Title IX requires them to treat women as women and not give women's spaces and places on teams to men. And so they made the right decision legally. And now all eyes are on the NCAA, who has, on the very day of the eclipse, been eclipsed in terms of adherence to Title IX by the other major collegiate sports organization in the United States.
And so, what in your opinion may be the NCAA's move now because there is so much pressure? And I think this decision from the NAIA makes so much sense, and it's interesting to me. Not just from a legal standpoint and Title IX, as you mentioned, but also just from an obvious rationality perspective. And they say, sure, you can be a transgender male and participate in male sports, but nobody's doing that. Well, why? We know the obvious reasons, because males want to dominate women's sports, and there's no such controversy and crisis for men's sports and to preserve those protections. Right. And so, are we going to get some kind of, equal protection argument or some other kind of thing arising out of this? Is the NCAA going to, look at this and maybe protest that piece of it?
The NCAA, it's interesting if you look at the history of the NAIA and the NCAA. The NAIA had women's sports long before the NCAA did. They were resistant at the very outset of Title IX. Took them 10 years before they even had anything other than male sports. They were a male sports only organization up until 1982. And they've just reverted back to kind of this anti-women stance. So it's anybody's guess where they end up on this. Obviously, they're facing a lawsuit in Georgia in federal court right now that I actually brought on behalf of 16 female athletes challenging the NCAA's rules. And we're anxious to see what they do.
And so let's talk a little bit more about that lawsuit. We had one of the female athletes on this program, and of course, I've spoken with Riley Gaines a few times, and that is a great lawsuit to pressure and get a court order, in fact, to make sure to protect women's sports. Where is that at? I mean, you just recently filed it, but where is that at, and where do you see this heading?
The NCAA has hired a mega law firm, which I don't know if that's a good or bad sign, but they hired a huge law firm to defend the case. They asked for additional time, and so they have until May to answer our complaint. But within days, the spontaneous reaction to the lawsuit has been enormous. The governor of Georgia, the Attorney General in Georgia, the Lieutenant Governor in Georgia, they all come out and support and urge Georgia institutions which have also been sued in this lawsuit to support our position and put pressure on the NCAA to change their rules. So, the NCAA is forcing this gender ideology on a lot of universities that don't want it and on female athletes whom they're harming. So one would think that if there were rational people on the Board of Governors, or if Charlie Baker cared about the safety of women in sports, they'd make a change and they'd make it quick. But so far, all the NCAA has asked for additional time to answer the complaint in the lawsuit.
That's really interesting, that some of these colleges don't actually want these type of rules, but they have to follow the NCAA's current policy if they want to participate in those sponsored sports. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. You'll remember the Alston case that was decided by the Supreme Court in 2021. And the court essentially found that the NCAA operated like a monopoly. They called it a monopsony, but they found liability, potential liability on behalf of the NCAA because of the way that they operate. And they're a huge national conglomeration. They have huge power. They have lots of money, and they seem to do what they want rather than do what athletes need and what's best for collegiate sport.
So, with this new the rule coming out and policy with the NAIA, does this help or impact or influence your lawsuit at all?
I think it has to, because it demonstrates the accuracy of the analysis that we put in on the lawsuit, which is that Title IX applies, and Title IX requires that you protect the rights of women and you not have males competing in female sports. So I think it has to have an impact. And the other thing I would say is it should have a practical impact. We've all seen over the last year or so with conference realignment that the real power in college sports is trending towards the conferences. And I recommend that today, as soon as possible, those conference commissioners at the SEC and the Big Ten, they get Jim Carr, the commissioner of the NAIA, on the line and talk about breaking off women's sports and having them run by the
Yeah, and
NAIA.
we'll have to leave it there,
forming a
Bill
new
Bock. I
organization.
really appreciate everything that you're doing to save women's sports, and this should come down to practical protection of women, and not just all of this woke ideology. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Well, in another fascinating legal story today, the SEC has paused the climate disclosure rule pending a court challenge. This headline from The Hill, which says the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC, on Thursday announced it will stay implementation of its final rule requiring companies to disclose their climate-related risks pending the results of a legal challenge from GOP-led states. The SEC said in its ruling, the stay does not indicate an abandonment of the rule, which will continue to defend against a court challenge from Republican attorneys general. The rule, finalized by the SEC in March, requires that companies disclose any risks climate change poses to their businesses, and in some cases, that larger and mid-sized companies provide information about their carbon dioxide emissions. 9 Republican attorneys general, led by Brenna Bird of Iowa, have sued in the Eighth Circuit, arguing the rule exceeds the agency's authority. The lawsuit is one of 3 against the rule, with 25 Republican state attorneys general involved in the litigation. So let's bring back our Legal Eagle panel. Mike Donnelly, who is a law professor and attorney, and Josh Hammer, who's the senior editor at large for Newsweek and host of the Josh Hammer Show, and also an attorney. So, Mike, let's start with you. Your reaction first to this whole climate change, I think, nonsense.
Well, I mean, look, this is like enforced orthodoxy here. The government has a position that lots of people don't agree with, and they're trying to enforce it through regulations. I mean, just what we need, more regulations on business, right? We have an economy that is struggling, and we need to regulate business more by killing more trees so we can produce more paper. Oh, wait, we can just put it online and do PDFs. Forget it. Never mind. I mean, I don't agree with what the government is doing here, but I do agree with the SEC's decision to hold off on these regulations for a couple of reasons. One, it's the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. Look, if someone's challenging it, then wait and see how this turns out instead of going down the path of enforcing it. This is something that the Treasury Department should do in the case of the NASB v. Yellen on the Corporate Transparency Act, where the department has issued rules requiring small businesses, again, an engine of growth in our economy, 45% of all employees are in small businesses, 56 million people running small businesses, and they're trying to require everyone, with businesses under 30 or so to report who owns the business. Why? They're trying to crack down on money laundering, they say, but this is just ridiculous. Again, another big database where people have to report information about themselves and their businesses to the federal government. What could go wrong?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're right that this is an implementation of orthodoxy. That was really well said. Where, if businesses want to be climate friendly and they want to promote that to their customers, then we have capitalism for that reason. But if they don't want to, and they want to appeal to other people like me who don't really care about all this climate change nonsense, they should be able to. So, Josh, what's your view of all of this nonsense?
So first of all, Jenna, I want to just give a shout out to Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird, who you read there in that Hill excerpt. So Brenna and I actually went to the same law school. We're members of the same conservative debating society back at the University of Chicago Law School. She became the first Republican to win the Attorney General's seat in the Hawkeye State in 40 years. I mean, literally going back to the late 70s, early 80s. And she's done an absolutely bang up job thus far. She's one of the leading tips of the spear of the conservative backlash against the Biden administration. I actually have Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost on my show, the Josh Hammer Show, coming out tomorrow morning for a similar conversation. So we should be grateful for these conservative attorneys general who are pushing back against this enforcement of liberal woke orthodoxy from the Biden regime. So I want to just make that point right off the top. The second point is I want to just echo what the two of you have already said, which is there's no other way to understand this other than using the levers of power here in the bureaucracy and the administrative state to dictate an ideological agenda. Now, typically speaking, when it comes to the Obama administration, the Biden administration, Democratic presidents in recent years have typically used the EPA to do that when it comes to the clean air emissions and all sorts of stuff when it comes to the war on energy, cracking down on LNG exports. That's a politically hot issue in Pennsylvania and Ohio. But here they're actually using the SEC, which you might kind of squint and say, how can you possibly weaponize the SEC? Well, it's this. It's in trying to make the markets, try to make investors subservient to some totally extraneous, unrelated goal, which in this case is to serve so-called climate change. And it's totally nonsense here. And again, I do give credit to the Attorney General for pushing back there. The SEC, as my co-panelist properly said, deserves a modicum of credit for having the humility to kind of pause this while it's currently being sued. But we shouldn't lose the forest for the trees here. And this is just part and parcel of what the Biden administration is doing in an election year to try to shore up the left-wing flank, the progressive vote, the 18 to 35 demographic, because they're losing a lot of those voters to Trump right now, frankly.
Yeah, and I wish that that all of the COVID nonsense and those mandatory vaccines had been paused pending all of that litigation and some of those things. So I think that is a good thing that the SEC is doing. But let's talk about the Eighth Circuit. What do you think then, Mike Donnelly, is going to be the trajectory of this case? I mean, are we going to see this likely at the Supreme Court?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the Supreme Court has already given its decision on, or will be giving, talking about Chevron, right? I think Chevron ties in here. Is Chevron going to be overruled? And, has the agency here, the SEC, exceeded its authority, which is the argument. I mean, there's some interesting things happening here. So I think people are expecting the court may overrule or severely restrict Chevron. And I think there is a very good argument here that the SEC has exceeded its authority because, it can require companies to report things that the public needs to know about the risks of investing in a company. But is climate change a risk? I mean, how do you quantify that risk? And how should the agency be allowed to interpret that risk and then pass regulations on that? So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked. We don't have the answers right now. Will it come up to the Supreme Court? It could. And depending on how the court decides in Chevron or what have you, it might send it back. So we'll see. So I can say,
yeah, well, according to
we'll see. Good lawyer answer.
Yeah, but according to I think it was Sunny Hostin on The View yesterday, the eclipse was caused by climate change, so it is a great risk to everybody's eyesight and all of that. If you want to believe the ladies on The View, but Josh Hammer, I would love to see, as Mike pointed out, Chevron deference overturned, and I would love to see a majority opinion from somebody like Justice Gorsuch. How do you think this may turn out if it gets to the Supreme Court, given the current composition of the court?
So, Iowa sued. It's hard to speculate, obviously. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. But the Eighth Circuit, where Iowa is located, happens to be probably the most right-leaning appellate court in the entire country. So I clerked on the Fifth Circuit years ago, which is typically hailed as the most conservative circuit. And there are a lot of fiery conservatives on the Fifth Circuit. But if you're literally just going down judge by judge, looking at the numbers, who's a Republican nominee, who's a Democrat nominee, the Eighth Circuit, from a pure partisan perspective, is probably the most lopsided. So I like Iowa's odds when it comes to the Eighth Circuit. Ohio is also suing, if I'm not mistaken, this same regulation in the Sixth Circuit. So you might get a circuit split.
And Josh, so sorry to cut you off. That's all the time that we have here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. I will see you tomorrow night.